Alright, so a week ago now, for the first time in years, a championship fight ended with no winner and no belt strapped around the waist. And it couldn't have happened to a crappier division. I mean, heavyweight is buns, mate, and the division is screwed. One championship fight per year for the division, and this is how it ends. Now, a lot of people are blaming Aspinall for this, and if I'm being honest, I genuinely do think he is the only hope this division has. However, this week, recording this after the Ante Delija versus Waldo Cortes Acosta fight has genuinely made me realize that, dude, we're living in the worst possible timeline for Tom Aspinall. His teammate, who Tom has openly been glazing, saying he'd vacate the title for, talking about all this, all this stuff with him, openly spoke about the fact that he had never laid an eye poke on anyone, in talking about what happened with Gane and Aspinall and whatnot. And Tej just said, "No, I've never eye poked anyone before." Then in this new fight, proceeds to eye poke his opponent, then KO him, realized that it was from an eye poke, so only then to be brought back into the fight, then gets knocked out cold. Even worse, Wilder gets on the mic and says, "Hey Aspinall, this is how you overcome an eye poke," feeding into the hate Tom's getting. Dude, Aspinall is getting bitch. And I know I didn't describe that well, what happened, but basically all you need to know is that the worst thing that could possibly happen to Tom Aspinall just happened in that fight. Back to back, 2 weeks back to back is crazy. Now, I do think they should push Waldo to a pay-per-view because, look, he could end up doing good work with this boost. And I guess Tom won't have to vacate the title now for Ante, so this has me thinking about Tom's future in the sport. Now, more specifically, in this division, obviously. Realistically, who else in this division has the opportunity to bring in eyes? Because unless you're a Jon Jones fan, you don't actually want Gane as champ. This video's title is How Do We Save Heavyweight? Brother, Cyril Gane is not the answer. I genuinely think that if Gane had won, it would have been the single worst thing to ever happen to a division in the UFC of all time. And I'm not even being crazy. It would genuinely kill the division. Say what you want about Gane's style and enjoyability as a fighter, he's lost in title fights twice. What other division has a guy who's lost within the first minute of a championship fight, fighting for the belt again only a couple years later? And it's not even like he was champ before that or anything. He just lost to Ngannou before losing to Jones in round one. That's the number one contender of this division. Yeah, this division blows. I mean, he robbed Volkov too. And you know what? A part of me was thinking, what the hell? We can't have this guy as champ. He poked Aspinall's eyes out. He didn't even deserve the shot anyways because he already lost twice before. Volkov just got a win. Give him the shot. Dana was openly saying that he wanted to do something to help Volkov get Volkov back. He didn't do anything like that, but Volkov just got a win. Why don't they give him the shot next? Stuff gone. But then I was thinking, I mean, what the hell was that fight too, man? Jailton Almeida had the easiest layup to secure a title fight. All he had to do was win. There isn't any other competition. There's no other contenders. Why would they give it to Volkov? He just got beat by Aspinall in round one. But no, Jailton didn't want to strike in a fight. In a fight. He didn't want to damage his opponent in a fight. So he chose to grab him instead and hold him, barely progressing any subs or ground and pound. Why are you looking like this? You threw 33 strikes in 15 minutes. Land some shots. Volkov landed 123 strikes. You only threw 30 and only landed 20. That's crazy. I mean, I swear to God, heavyweight has to be the dumbest division ever. Remember what DC said to Tom? Not the Jailton can't fight thing, which ended up being true, but about him being able to go on a generational run because heavyweight sucks. I mean, it's generally garbage. A 10-3 heavyweight can go in and get a title shot in under 2 years of being in the UFC. Because the division has no one, and the people it does have suck. Alright, my bad. I was being too loud and my mic is absolutely stuffed. But look, remember when this came out a while back? This was the number of UFC fighters on roster in 2024. And these aren't even necessarily just active fighters. No, this is everyone the UFC has under contract. And wouldn't you know, there are only 30 UFC heavyweights, meaning half of the heavyweight roster are ranked. And of course, the talent pool is crap. You realistically can make it as a UFC heavyweight as long as you're a half decent at MMA and above 230 pounds. Every single one of the women's divisions have more people. Almost every division except for light heavy and flyweight have more than double the fighters rostered in the men's divisions. It all makes sense now as to why Tai Tuivasa can be ranked 12th on a 5-fight losing streak. I mean, the number one contender, if you even want to call him that, arguably lost to a guy who was finished in the first round by the champ. Enough said. Now, I wrote down this whole spiel about, the fight that we got to see last week in all of its entirety, 2 to 3 minutes, basically talking about what happened in the fight, whether Tom was winning or Gon was winning. But let's be real. Look at all the things that have come out since that. Tom wasn't going to finish the fight quicker than Jones, therefore Jones would have beat Aspinall. Gunn was winning, saying that Aspinall was fraud checked, saying that he took the smart way out. And look, I can't change any of those opinions. I can't tell what Aspinall was going through. I can't tell what Gunn was going through. I can't tell if it was intentional or not. Herb Dean came out and said that he's spoken to a bunch of fighters recently who have openly, been retired now, openly saying that they did use to eye poke people intentionally when even in Herb's fights when they weren't and just didn't they just didn't ever get in trouble for it. I rewatched the fight back and honestly, look, for me, it was really close. Neither were dominating by any stretch of the means. I think Garn was landing more. I think he landed like 3 strikes more. But look, round one of the Ilya Taporia versus Holloway fight, I had Holloway winning. Round one of Umar versus Murab, I had Umar winning. You cannot simply judge a fight off of a round, especially not an unfinished one, and with Aspinall's power, you can't disregard anything. So it really doesn't mean much who was winning, and I pretty much had it tied up, with Gane maybe taking a small lead. However, that does not automatically mean Aspinall is all of a sudden this fraud. The guy literally cleared out has almost cleared out the majority of the entire division, and he only just had his first title defense, and most of those were round one submissions or KOs. So look, you can't discredit Tom, and look, he didn't continue, but bro, Gone fingered in the eyeballs. Not just one, but both. And not just both, but full pressure push and scrapes in each of them. The other eye was pretty bad too, with blur apparently, so it's unfair that Aspinall should have to fight without sight because of another man's foul and illegal strike. So no hate to Aspinall. Tom was getting booed, and I understand why booing did happen. UFC tickets are hella expensive, and no one wants to see a card end like that. Everyone came for Garn versus Tom, and seeing that ending is BS, but that's Garn's fault if, he was already warned. So look, Dana did say Tom didn't want to continue. However, the phrase honestly should have been Tom couldn't continue. And I generally do think Dana is pissed at Tom. He's openly said that he would give the number ninth. Now, the script has already been written before the Ante Delija thing, but you guys know what happened with Ante Delija. And Tom's father said that he would openly like to vacate to move to boxing in the next couple of years. So obviously Dana would be pissed. It's a Francis thing all over again, and that was in heavyweight too. So what the hell do we do to save this division? Well, first of all, we got to look at the rankings. No one in this division is going to breathe life back into it through the rankings. Volkov is arguably the only name, but I don't know if I can get anyone. I don't know if you could get anyone to care about Volkov at this rate. Waldo Cortes Acosta had that big moment, so I do think he will be an exciting prospect, but I don't think that he can go from a co-main on an Apex card to a star. So let's get him another fight or two before we can hopefully continue to build his growing beef with Tom. Now, I saw a list of names with Tom, Gane, Jones, and Ngannou saying that these four biggest current heavyweight stars at all will end 2025 without a UFC win. Tom is our champ. I think that's good. I'm glad he's still the champ. He brings fun fights and fun finishes. But I do think he has that Hamza and Merab effect where he's so dominant that every fight becomes less interesting due to the fact that the division can't compete and can't keep up. And both middleweight and bantamweight are in much better places than Tom's division. However, Tom didn't beat Gane in less than 2 minutes. He wasn't dominating, so I think interest has expanded. So yeah, as much as I was saying, Gon shouldn't get the shot, he didn't deserve it in the first place, I think genuinely there was some good that came out of that fight. Because there is now so much more hype for Aspinall versus Gane than there was for the actual fight when it was on the way. So realistically, I think you should do that rematch and keep interest in the heavyweight division longer. And hopefully long enough to where the UFC can figure out what the hell they're going to do with the rest of the division because it's on live support. Now, people were saying that they want this fight rebooked before the end of the year. I mean, if they could rebook it for December, I'd be happy, but I'm fine with waiting until January to March, as long as we see some, as long as we can come up with some ideas. Give it time. Rebook it from a little while from now so that we can have time to figure out what's going to be next straight after that. Now, it's no secret that Pereira and Jones are looming over the division. They're both into each other. I mean, pause. They're both into fighting each other. Joe Rogan came out and said that he wants that fight for a BMF belt. Pereira posted his reaction to the eye poke with the caption of his stone head, Jon Jones's bone, or well, the other bone maybe too, symbolizing putting them together to equal the White House in June. Now that is a pretty big fight, yes, and it's in heavyweight, so yeah, look, that would be very good for heavyweight. But that's pretty much a one and done. Jones, we all know what Jones's deal is. He wants to fight, but he wants to fight on his own terms against someone who he can, like against someone who he wants, and maybe he's earned that, but it's killing the heavyweight division. We've already just went through this BS for over a year. He's not gonna be the savior of the heavyweight division, and neither is Pereira. They're both close to 40. They're both closer to 40 than they are 35. Neither of these guys can realistically be the future of heavyweight. The only man that I think can really be that future is Aspinall. So if we're doing big fights at heavyweight, I think Aspinall needs to be involved. However, I do think Pereira should still come up. I think the UFC just needs to push him to want to go for the three belts rather than going for Jones. I get Pereira's angle. Beating Jones would be legacy defining. They're both 38. Jones was slow in his last fight. There is some cheddar for Pereira. However, I think for the UFC, it's best he fights Aspinall. So if I'm Dana, I'm telling Alex that his wish has been granted and that he's welcome at heavyweight. Jury and Olberg can fight for the title, fight for the vacant light heavyweight title, and that'll be fun. That won't kill that division either. I'm pretty sure Yuri and Olberg will be able to handle that. But then I then tell Alex that he has to fight the winner of Aspinall and the Gane rematch. And only then, if he did win that fight, we'd let him fight Jones. Boom, blam, why not? 2-1 legacy deal for Peloton. I mean, I do think Jones versus Pereira could work, but it just feels like such an obvious one and done fight. And look, Pereira's probably only got one or two fights left. Give him the one or two of the biggest fights that he can have right up and right now. Give him that. Give him give him the title fight, and then say, look, if you do win this title fight, you can fight Jones. So I'd lean on Pereira. He saved the light heavyweight division. He can save heavyweight too. It'll be tough because I think light heavy has better names. But if you put a strong contender, which I do think Pereira would be, against a guy like Aspinall, and say Pereira became champ, or say he lost to Aspinall, or maybe they had a rematch or whatever. Now, I do think that would be fun. And Gunn has leveled up in the eyes of the fans, so I do think he can also help save this division. We also got Costa. I just don't think Jon Jones and his personal quest will. So look, like, subscribe, comment what you think will save the heavyweight division, and what you thought of the fight. Thanks, guys.